Well, isn't is the direct? I guess I'm wondering where "I Don't Deserve You" comes in. Is it really about? Are we in God's world now?
For someone who is familiar with my Blink record that I wrote, a song called "In My Arms." If they're not familiar, they should check that out. But I wrote a song called "In My Arms" on my Blink record that was inspired by my son Solomon, and it was really interesting how I was truly writing about him as my muse, and it sounded like I was writing. I mean, it just paralleled God's love to us, just like my love for my son. And "I Don't Deserve You" is actually about my son Oliver. That he literally is the sweetest Dennis the Menace you've ever met. He has bumps and bruises and is very, very risk-taking and wants to try things on his own, and isn't by nature directly disobedient as much as he is a risk-taker and an adventurer. And that independence in him sometimes, just from the time he could crawl, we knew that we had some work on our hands. And what's interesting is he just turned 6, and the way he's developed and the way he's turned out has given us so much hope. Because when he was like 1 and 2, I literally feared for his life. And when he was 3 years old, he got up at 6 in the morning, unlocked the door to the house. He had a step stool and unlocked the door. We're sound asleep. No one hears this. And walked across the street to a neighbor's house who we fortunately were friends with. But he rang their doorbell, woke them up. The father came to the door and saw this 3.5-year-old little boy standing there. And he was like, "Hey, Mr. Pat, don't say the S word." And of course, Mr. Pat thought he meant what everyone else is probably thinking when they hear me say the S word. And so he leaves, but then he comes back and rings their doorbell again. And he says, "Bye. Just want to say bye." And he was like, "Oliver, are you sleepwalking? Like, you're not supposed to be out. It's 6 in the morning. Like, I'm pretty sure you're not supposed." So he watched him walk home, and he's like, "You need to go home right now. Mr. Pat will watch you." And so he watched him walk home and then called us later that day. And the only reason that we knew he did it before Pat even called us was because his shoes were sitting by the door covered in, you know how the dew makes the grass really wet. And so he had grass and leaves or whatever all over his boots. And we were like, when did this happen? And he's like, "Oh, I went out this morning." And we're like, "What? What do you mean you went out this morning?" And so we weren't really sure he was telling the truth or what he meant, because he was, 3. And Pat calls us and he says, "Are you guys awake now?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's probably 8 o'clock. And he's like, "Well, a couple hours ago, Oliver knocked on our door and he said to not say the S word." And I was like, he left the house? Like, he unlocked the door and crossed the street and woke you up, and then what did he say? And he told me, and I said, "He means stupid. They're not supposed to say stupid," and he refers to that as the S word. And Pat was like, "Well, I was kind of like, do you use that language with your kids?" And I was like, no. And he meant stupid. And so what's interesting is that 2 days later, he did the same exact thing. So we had new locks installed that were really high, almost like hotel, like the tall chain locks where he couldn't get to them, because I was like, this will not always be this way. But right now, we can't risk him doing this, because we didn't hear him do that. But just anything, if you can hear that story, then just run with it, because that's what he's done with so many different things. But what I'm trying to paint the picture of is just with this really sweet spirit, and not really a defiant, ugly attitude. He's just really, really curious and independent and that kind of thing. And so I wrote the song because I think his behavior pushes me to my limits sometimes, and I'm very challenged in my behavior with him, because I will I'll kind of almost question my sanity at times when I'm dealing with something maybe he's done. And I remember this is when he was a little younger, but he colored a whole hallway with crayons while I was on the phone, and they were just all over the wall, and I was kind of like, okay, he knows this is wrong, and so I'm trying to not overreact, but I'm still trying to respond to the fact that my child has done something wrong, and not kill his spirit, and also not kill him. And so and so he's just been like I said, he's just this really sweet Dennis the Menace. And so because of that, I've had my most not proud mom moments with him where I've kind of lost it, like in my tone of voice or in my discipline. Obviously not abusing him or anything, but I've just literally